Cannabis farming is flourishing in Scotland. It's an illegal industry that exploits human trafficking to produce a potent drug. Its production here is now dominated by Vietnamese and Chinese gangs. They've been so successful, Scotland is now believed to be a net exporter of cannabis. Here's Scotland Tonight's Peter Smith.
Cannabis. It's the most commonly used illegal drug in Scotland. Most cannabis users have only ever seen the drug like this, in a relatively small amount, or like this, in a joint. This is the side to cannabis most users don't see. Farmed on an industrial scale by international crime gangs, and part of the trade in human trafficking.
Tôi không hề biết nơi tôi được đưa đến. Những cái tên gangster thì chúng nhốt tôi trong một căn hộ với hàng trăm cây cần sa.
We went inside Scotland's prisons to meet a Vietnamese victim of human trafficking. We've agreed to protect his identity because he was too scared to be filmed. His statement is read by an actor.
Chúng bắt tôi và chăm sóc các cây cần sa đó, và chúng quan sát tôi cũng như giám sát tôi để đảm bảo rằng tôi không thể trốn thoát. Tôi không biết phải làm gì cả. Tôi có gia đình ở Việt Nam và tôi cũng rất ghét những tên buôn ma túy. Tuy nhiên ở đây tôi chỉ có một mình. Tôi không biết phải làm gì. Tôi rất lo tính mạng của mình. Tôi chỉ muốn sống. Tôi cảm thấy mình như là một nô lệ vô hình vậy.
This isn't a story of cannabis farming in a foreign country. This is cannabis made in Scotland. Commercial farming of cannabis is dominated by gangs from Vietnam and China. It was first seen on an industrial scale in Australia and in North America in the mid-90s. Profits were high and risks were low. Production soon reached Britain, and by 2007, thousands of cannabis farms were already flourishing.
Well, I think that there could have been a greater use of intelligence, that the problem was flagged up in 2007 and a seminar was created in order to educate Scotland on the issue. But it was delivered against a background that saw an interest in saying that cannabis was not as dangerous a substance as otherwise thought, and that perhaps we should take a softer approach to it. So we were slow to pick up.
The health dangers of smoking cannabis are well documented. The question is, how much do users know about where their weed comes from? Who's suffering so they can get high?
Tôi rời bỏ Việt Nam và đến nước Anh vì tôi hy vọng rằng mình sẽ được an toàn. Tôi không hề mong đợi rằng mình lại sẽ bị nhốt trong một trang trại cây cần sa. Nói thật là ở trong đó rất là khó thở. Và tôi cũng rất hiếm khi có đủ đồ ăn lẫn thức uống. Tôi cũng không bao giờ được ra ngoài. Chính vì vậy, khi thấy cảnh sát đến, tôi đã rất vui mừng. Tôi nghĩ rằng mình đã được giải cứu. Tôi không hề mong đợi mình lại sẽ bị nhốt ở trong tù.
The trafficking of people to work in Scottish cannabis farms has been compared with a modern slave trade. They work 24 hours a day without pay, and if police come calling, it's the gardener, not the gangsters, who go to prison.
Some of these young people have been sexually abused. They're terrified to talk about that. And the criminals use the fact that the police are arresting them to continually coerce them, to threaten them, to say, don't tell the truth because you'll be arrested. The real traffickers and the real criminals are not even being touched.
The question used to be how cannabis was being smuggled into the UK, but the scale of these cannabis farms inside our cities and on our housing estates has been a game changer. Now, so much of the drug is grown right here in Scotland. More cannabis is being exported abroad than is coming in. Cannabis is big business for organised crime, and in Scotland, it's thriving.
Peter Smith has this exclusive report.
Side by side with the man he publicly refers to as his packy friend, Show Racism the Red Card today condemned the Rangers chief executive for what they called the ill-advised use of racist and offensive language.
Look, the point I made when I was being interviewed the other day was that, my relationship with Imran and his relationship with me, where, he calls me a Yorkshire so-and-so. I mean...
You said that Imran Ahmed is your little packy friend. Is that normal language for people working at Rangers?
No, it's not normal language. It's not normal language for me.
Would you accept it from a player?
Would I accept it from a player? in terms of being said in a friendly way or in a disparaging way?
Either way.
Well, I only use it with Imran. I don't use it in the public domain.
But if you heard a player using that kind of language, would it be tolerated?
No, it'd be inappropriate.
And what would happen to that player?
Well, he'd be subject to an investigation. Or if there was a complaint. Imran hasn't complained.
The Rangers chief executive has upset anti-racism campaigners, but what about his relationship with Ali McCoist? The Ibrox boss yesterday reacted to Green calling his players the worst ever Rangers team.
It's also the best Rangers team Charles has ever seen. I'm not sure how many titles Charles has won. I don't know his career, but I've been very fortunate enough to win 11 at our football club.
I mean, perhaps I shouldn't have said this was the worst Rangers team ever. You know, perhaps that wasn't a good thing to say. Was it true? Was it misleading? It wasn't set to win fans over, weren't set to win anyone over.
As for Fran Sandaza's dismissal from the club after falling victim to a prank call, even the best player in the world would have been sacked if he'd done the same.
Whether it was Lionel Messi, if Lionel Messi was a Rangers player and he was recorded saying, I don't want to play for Rangers, get me a contract, I'll go and sign for another club, give it to me, don't go through the club, I'd sack Lionel Messi. It doesn't matter if anyone denigrates this club, if anyone has no respect for the badge, if anyone doesn't want to work here, then go.
Peter Smith, STV News.
Now, Rangers Chief Executive Charles Green has admitted he agreed to receive a payment of £25,000 from one of Craig White's business partners during the early stage of his buyout of the club. STV has obtained a recording in which Green personally asks White for the money. However, Green insists the cheque bounced and he never actually received the funds. Peter Smith has this exclusive report.
He denies having any relationship with Craig White, a man he calls discredited and a fantasist. But claims made by White over his involvement in the Sevco Consortium's acquisition of Rangers now raise questions over how closely the pair worked together in that deal.
Well, next step is we've got to give them some money. We've heard what I just said.
Yeah.
So now I've told him that, well, I'll have a serious conversation. I'll say, oh, Craig's gone. We can listen to Mr. Craig's gone. I'll definitely come over to your office. I've got my chocolate.
Yeah.
And I'll go and give it, but I need money.
Yeah,
for you.
So if you give me your details, I'll cover whatever you've got to pay out. It's not,
what
it's not a
I'm saying
problem.
is there's no trace into my bank account.
Yeah.
But I'll do it now, write it down now.
A statement tonight from Rangers said claims made against Charles Green are now in the hands of their lawyers.
Aidan Earley, Craig White never invested one penny in the acquisition of those assets.
We've obtained evidence here that Craig White is claiming that he paid £25,000 into your bank account, Mr. Green. Is that true?
Well, Mr. White didn't pay money into my bank account. £25,000 cheque was put into my bank account.
This was for legal costs?
For legal costs. And 3 days later, the cheque bounced, and following this interview, I'll show you the bank statement that confirms that.
Charles Green did show me documentation which showed a cheque for £25,000 was paid into his account on the 11th of May and appeared to bounce 3 days later. However, STV News has obtained documentary evidence which appears to show Aidan Earley's business account for Liberty Capital paid a cheque for £25,000 on the 15th of May. Craig White is also claiming he was duped over the transfer of Rangers' key assets. When Rangers' CVA to come out of administration failed, a new company was needed to protect the club and key assets from liquidation. Sevco 5088 had been set up and was waiting to acquire these. Craig White believes he was involved. But then Sevco Scotland came along. Ibrox Stadium, Murray Park and other vital assets for Rangers Football Club ended up here and under the control of Charles Green's consortium. What was Craig White and Aidan Earley's role in Sevco 5088?
Well, neither of them had a role in Sevco 5088. That was a company formed by Phil Fisher Waterhouse for the purpose of acquiring Rangers. Of course, what everyone knows is that in the ensuing weeks, as the model unfolded, Sevco Scotland acquired Rangers, not 5088.
What was the purpose of you shifting the assets from Sevco 5088 to Sevco Scotland?
That never happened. That's never happened. The assets were never in 5088. Sevco 5088 never bought anything. Never there. End of conversation.
But this is contrary to what Rangers officially said at the time. They told us, for the avoidance of doubt, Sevco 5088 Limited bought the assets of the Rangers Football Club and then transferred them to Sevco Scotland Limited, so that all the assets would be in the Scottish registered company that is Rangers FC. It also contradicts the proposed CVA document with Duff & Phelps, which clearly indicates that Sevco 5088 would be compelled to purchase the business and the assets of Rangers if a CVA failed, which of course it did. You admit that you have told Craig White what he wanted to hear in order to get him to sell Rangers assets. Have you or Imran Ahmed ever misled the Rangers supporters by telling them what they wanted to hear?
Never.
Never?
Never.
You're clear about that?
Absolutely clear.
What about when you said that Manchester United were supportive of Rangers moving to the Premiership?
Yeah.
They've clearly said that they're against it.
The spokesman did. So do you think Alex Ferguson would like to see Rangers in this league?
So it was
Manchester
Ferguson.
United. You define Manchester United.
Who at Manchester United told you that you were wanted in the Premiership?
I've had discussions with a number of clubs.
Who at Manchester United told you that you were wanted in the Premiership?
Well, why do we want to know that?
Because I think there's evidence here that perhaps you've made a statement that has been contradicted by Manchester United. What about when Imran Ahmed told the group of Rangers supporters that talks with the Dallas Cowboys were going well?
Well, they are. I've got an email now, if you want to read it again after this interview.
For a link-up?
From Dallas, with Dallas Cowboys.
The Dallas Cowboys have previously told us that there was no such talks that they were aware of.
I don't care, Peter, what they've said. I've just told you categorically in front of camera that when this interview finishes, I will show you an email where we're invited to go to Dallas Cowboys. The email came in 3 days ago.
To this point, no such email has been presented to us. Tonight, a Dallas Cowboys spokesperson told STV they were unaware of any talks with Rangers. Mr Green, you admit that you've told Craig White what he wanted to hear to get into Rangers. You've boasted about things to fans and investors that have been contradicted at a later stage. You admit to using languages in the offices of Ibrox which might be deemed as inappropriate or even racist. What does that say about you?
It says I'm honest. It says I speak it as I find.
Making statements that are contradicted at a later point and hoodwinking someone is honest.
Look, something that's contradicted, you can contradict anything. Tell me what's proven. Let's not talk about contradictions. Look, everything I've said has been contradicted. Everything I've said has been contradicted. But nothing's been confirmed and nothing's been proven, Peter.
Good evening. As we reported earlier, Charles Green has quit as Rangers chief executive, citing recent events as a distraction. He will leave the company at the end of May, but still remains the single largest shareholder at the club. Live now to Peter Smith, who's at Ibrox. Peter, you were the last person to interview Green almost 2 weeks ago in that grilling interview. Why do you think he's gone?
Well, Rahman, Charles Green has been a divisive figure and his 11 months here at Ibrox have been shrouded in controversy. The latest, of course, came when the club's former owner, Craig White, alleged that he had business links with Green's Sevco consortium during its acquisition of Rangers. That was compounded by Green's use of racist language during an interview with a newspaper, and that prompted the board to conduct its own investigation. Now, we have to suspect that all of that has played a part in Green's decision to step down. He's gone from fan favourite to a toxic element in little over a fortnight. Here's what he had to say to STV News just last week. Where will you be in the next 12 months?
Probably in that chair as opposed to this, but God willing, I've been healthy all my life. You know, I'll still be sat in this office. The fans supporting me, the board supporting me. This is not about money anymore. What it is for me is, you know, to make sure this club, and if someone walks through that door tomorrow who's politically correct, who doesn't say inappropriate things, and he can do a better job than me, I'll leave tomorrow.
Now, there was also a fractious relationship between Green and some of the staff here at Ibrox. He, of course, had a very public disagreement with the manager, Ali McCoist, after he branded it the worst Rangers team in the history of the team playing. He also had a breakdown in his relationship with the chairman, Malcolm Murray, and we understand that Walter Smith was prepared to consider his position on the board if Charles Green did not go. but there now leaves question marks hanging over the future of other directors here at Rangers. Brian Stockbridge and Imran Ahmed are two directors who were brought to this club by Charles Green, and also the pressures on Rangers to appoint a new chief executive as the club faces a crucial point in its attempt to rise to the back of the top of Scottish football. Back to you.
It certainly does, Peter. Thanks very much for that, live from Ibrox.
Women make up a majority of the Scottish electorate, but they remain markedly underrepresented in Parliament and wider political debate. TV programmes, including this one, have faced criticism for the lack of female contributors. So why are we faced with this problem, and what can be done to tackle it? Here's Peter Smith.
They call it male and stale. Political debate in Scotland is often dominated by men's voices. Are we drowning out the opinions of more than half our population? Two of Scotland's major political parties are led by women, but across Holyrood, women are in a minority. In 2011, they won 45 seats. That equates to just 35% of MSPs being female, down from 40% in 2003. But how does Scottish politics compare with the rest of the world? At Westminster, just 22% of MPs are female. Team GB might have finished a proud third at the Olympic Games, but in the International League table for women's representation, the UK comes a measly 56th, ranking alongside Malawi and below Pakistan. So how might we address the imbalance? Should we be looking at quotas or positive discrimination to make equal representation of women a legal obligation?
Often those who don't believe in a quota system will say that it somehow leads to a second class of politician, that women are there by virtue of their gender rather than by their ability. I don't think that's true. I think we're almost 100 years since women in the UK got the vote. Women are still dreadfully underrepresented in all spheres of public life, and perhaps quotas is something that we ought to give more serious attention to.
Broadcast media in Scotland has also been criticised for underrepresenting female voices. Last night, this programme, as well as the BBC's Newsnight Scotland, both had all-male panels. Both received criticism on social media.
Too often in our television programmes and our radio programmes, because men are the ones who are given a platform to the exclusion of women in Scotland, I think we end up with a fairly narrow view of what constitutes political debate. Women have views on a range of matters at this time in Scottish politics, and I think more women, and many men too, would like to see these views represented on our television screens and in our radio programmes.
Merida, stop this!
This summer, Hollywood made a female Scot the heroine in its latest blockbuster. But is Scottish politics brave enough to fire its own women into the heart of our national debate?
Reports of domestic abuse in Scotland have gone up to a 5-year high over the course of the last football season. The Scottish Government says the increase is due to victims being more willing to come forward. But Celtic and Rangers supporters say the rise over the last 12 months, when there have been no Old Firm derbies, show they have been unfairly blamed in previous years. Peter Smith reports.
Just please, not now, please.
Domestic abuse has been a serious problem in Scotland for years. But from figures obtained by STV News, it seems the problem is getting worse. There were just under 54,500 reports of domestic abuse in Scotland over the last 12 months. That's an increase of 4% on last year and 4% higher than the average for the last 5 years. But authorities say the increase is not necessarily a cause for concern.
My job is to make sure that we do investigate things thoroughly and properly and they're recorded. We have to ensure that victims have confidence to come to the police. So an increase initially in domestic abuse wouldn't be a bad thing for me.
We know there are spikes in and around football matches. We know that there is issues with alcohol involved as well, but there's no excuse for domestic abuse at all.
Lawmakers and law enforcers have previously identified one fixture in the Scottish calendar, which they say is a catalyst for increases in domestic abuse.
The match is there to be enjoyed, have a good time and go home. Any form of domestic abuse particularly will not be tolerated by Strathclyde Police.
The game, whether it may have gone in their favour or otherwise, provokes things that happen into the early hours of the following day. Strathclyde Police are attending. 134 incidents on that one day.
This is the first football season in Scotland without the infamous Old Firm derby. and authorities were expecting to see a decline in domestic abuse in the absence of the fixture. Earlier this year, Police Scotland's Chief Constable Stephen House said, "We aren't seeing those spikes that we had after Old Firm games, and there aren't the same levels. We had one year when there were 7 games. We'll take the holiday while we can." But figures obtained by STV News through a Freedom of Information request show the sharpest increase in domestic abuse is in fact in the Strathclyde region, where the Old Firm derby is normally played. Even without the Celtic Rangers clashes, domestic abuse is up 11%.
Anybody who ever thought that domestic abuse was caused by a particular sporting fixtures clearly doesn't understand the nature of domestic abuse.
Perhaps it's an easy way. Let's avoid perhaps a wider society issue. We'll just blame it on the football.
Whatever the cause, domestic abuse is on the rise in Scotland, and authorities will be under pressure to get to the root of the problem. Peter Smith, STV News. Michael Easton's family says he was a quiet, well-behaved and popular boy who loved his family deeply. Today, by the roadside where he was killed, grief and remembrance. We are currently in Grangemouth, which is where 13-year-old Michael Easton was last seen playing with his friends at 10 o'clock on Friday night. Michael was trying to make his way home to Polmont, which is on the other side of this busy 4-lane motorway behind me now. Police say his body was found on the M9 shortly before 6 o'clock in the morning yesterday. Michael was knocked down as he tried to cross the motorway, but the driver did not stop. Police are now appealing for the public to help with their inquiries.
Michael's a 13-year-old wee boy whose parents are devastated by his death, and we and the public, I think, owe it to them. If you have any information of a Dutch people, come forward to the police.
Locals told STV News this motorway is a shortcut, sometimes used by youngsters crossing between the towns. There is meant to be a security fence to stop them, but people we spoke to were immediately able to show us this gap. Michael's body was found close by. The death has shocked people on both sides of the M9.
My son's 13. My son knows him. You know what I mean? He's at the same school. It's absolutely a shocker.
It's just an absolute tragedy. It's horrible, really.
It is a tragedy, not only for the parents but for the community.
Police investigating the death say it is possible someone could have hit Michael without realising. All drivers who were on this stretch of the M9 on Friday night and Saturday morning are now being asked to carefully examine their vehicle or their conscience. Peter Smith, STV News.
Now, the real independence referendum won't take place till autumn next year. But today, thousands of Glasgow University students got to have their say on the subject in a first-of-its-kind ballot. Scotland Tonight's Peter Smith was there to watch history unfold.
The polls are closed. The votes have been counted. A declaration is imminent. Both the yes and the no camps say they're confident of victory, and the mood on this campus campaign trail has so far been friendly between these fierce political rivals, but that atmosphere could be about to change. The tension and excitement is palpable. This is crunch time.
On the question, should Scotland be an independent country, the number of yes votes was 967. The number of no votes was 1,614.
What was interesting is I know the Deputy First Minister visited. There was a succession of other ministers as well and MSPs, and I think the Yes campaign even had 2 paid members of staff. So having thrown the kitchen sink at it, they must be really disappointed that they didn't achieve a better result.
Like the population at large, most of the students are undecided about what they think about independence. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's so important that we have this, the length of campaign, and I think what will be the intensity of the campaign we're going to have over the next 20 months, is it will give people a chance to get the information they want, get the answers to the questions they want to ask. And I think as we have that debate and people get more engaged, the vote will move towards yes.
So the Better Together campaign has won this contest in Glasgow. But of course the real referendum won't happen until autumn of 2014. We'll find out the exact date next month. But there's still a long way to go in the wider battle for Scotland's future. This is STV News. Good evening. Union leaders have condemned Scottish Coal after it announced it was in liquidation with the loss of almost 600 jobs. The Scottish Government has pledged to do all it can to support those who've been made redundant and has announced a new trust will be set up to restore old open-cast coal mines across the country. Fiona McElwraith reports.
Fiona McElwraith, STV News.
The Scottish Labour leader Joanne Lamont has characterised the current constitutional debate as a battle between Scotland and Alex Salmond. In her speech to the party's conference in Inverness, Miss Lamont told delegates that Labour was the only serious option for delivering social justice. From the Eden Court Theatre, here's our political editor, Bernard Ponsonby.
Bernard Ponsonby, STV News, at the Scottish Labour Party conference in Inverness.
The 1st Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Scotland has been granted the freedom of the city of Edinburgh. Soldiers who've spent 6 months training security forces in Afghanistan marked their homecoming with a parade down the Royal Mile. Members of the battalion paused to remember their comrade, Captain Walter Barry from Glasgow, who was shot dead in a so-called green on blue attack in November. Residents of Aberdeenshire have the best quality of life in any rural area in Scotland, according to a new survey. It's the 4th time since 2006 that Aberdeenshire has claimed the top spot in the Bank of Scotland study, outshining last year's winners, the Shetland Islands. To sport, and Godsme Judge has won the Scottish Grand National. The 7-year-old became the youngest horse since 2001 to win the Ayr event, sealing victory by 4 lengths. Big Occasion was second, followed by Mr Marker. The winner at Aintree, Aurora's Encore, ridden by Ryan Mania, failed to figure in the finish, despite closing in on leaders mid-race. Rangers have been warned they must appoint a new chief executive as a matter of priority. Charles Green announced his decision to step down as CEO yesterday, saying recent allegations of business links with Craig White and use of racist language had become a distraction. The Rangers board held a meeting before the team's 2-1 defeat at home to Peterhead this afternoon. But analysts say the Ibrox club will be rudderless until it finds a replacement for Green.
So that's an imperative.
There were 2 games on the SPL fixture card this afternoon. Dundee managed to stave off relegation from Scotland's top flight with a 2-1 win against St Mirren. The Tayside club are now 10 points adrift with just 4 games left to play. Elsewhere, Hearts beat Kilmarnock 1-0 in Ayrshire. In the First Division, Partick Thistle won promotion with a 2-0 win at Falkirk this afternoon. The Glasgow club secured the SFL1 title and will take its place in the SPL next season. Staying with sport, and the 3rd round of the Scottish Rally Championship took place in Aberdeen today. The winners of the Granite City Rally arrived back in Duthie Park this afternoon after a fiercely fought race. Over 100 cars took part in the 45-mile circuit over forestry tracks, and winners David Bogie and Kevin Ray were delighted with the result.
Just pleased to get the win.
That's all from STV News and Sport for the moment. We're back tomorrow at 6:15. From everyone here on the Weekend Team, have a very good evening.